Tuesday's general election brings the Equal Rights Amendment back to the Iowa ballot. The stakes are high and the rhetoric is hot. We take a temperature reading from ERA opponent Phyllis Schlafly of the Eagle Forum and ERA supporter Eleanor Smeal of the Feminist Majority Foundation on today's edition of Iowa Press. But first, a big factor in any election is turnout, and turnout is affected by a lot of things: appeal of the candidates, the intensity of the issues, even the weather. Let's get a different kind of a temperature reading now as we call for the insights of Mike Glover of the Associated Press and Kay Henderson of Radio Iowa.
Kay, it feels to me like it's going to be a pretty big turnout this year. I have a real sense that people are paying attention to this election. The presidency is shaping up as a horse race now. We've got a couple of hot congressional races, and there's the ERA on the ballot. All of those are going to be driving turnout up. Ordinarily, I'd say big turnout helps Democrats. There are about 100,000 more of them. But this year, one major factor in that turnout will be Ross Perot voters. We just don't know where they're going to land.
You're right. Perot supporters may go into the voting booth, vote for Perot, and go back out. Or they may stay in there and vote on other races. And I think they could provide the deciding votes in some very tight legislative contests this year.
Well, I think one thing that's very clear, and that's that a big turnout is going to help the Equal Rights Amendment. It may pass because of that. Apathy has always been the ERA's enemy. For Kay Henderson of Radio Iowa, I'm Mike Glover of the AP. That's our insight.
Major funding for this program has been provided by Friends of Iowa Public Television, with additional funding provided by the Daily Tribune of Ames, owned by Iowans who love Iowa and believe in a free press and in Iowa's community newspapers. This is the Sunday, November 1st edition of Iowa Press, a discussion on the Iowa ERA initiative with Eleanor Smeal and Phyllis Schlafly. Here is Dean Board.
Well, 2 days from now, America goes into the voting booth, and Iowa steps into the national spotlight as the only state with the Equal Rights Amendment on the 1992 ballot. Pro and anti-ERA forces and money have been drawn to Iowa, and on this edition of Iowa Press, we discussed the opposing views of the ERA initiative, and we've invited two of the more prominent spokespersons for one final airing of that issue. ERA supporter Eleanor Smeal is the founder and president of the Feminist Majority Foundation and also a past president of the National Organization for Women. And also joining us on this edition of Iowa Press is anti-ERA activist Phyllis Schlafly, founder and president of the Eagle Forum and a longtime Republican delegate and committee woman. We welcome you both to Iowa Press. Also joining us in Iowa Press, David Yepsen, the Des Moines Register, Mike Glover of the Associated Press, and Kay Henderson of Radio Iowa.
Briefly, please, Eleanor Smeal, why should there be an ERA in Iowa?
What's needed? Right now, this Constitution, which was written in 1857, says that all men are by nature free and equal. We're just adding the word woman, and then we're adding another sentence, which essentially says, neither the state nor its political subdivisions shall on the basis of gender deny equal rights under the law. Now, why is it needed? Women are discriminated against. We know what the pay situation is. Women make, we say 71 cents on a dollar, but if you look at it by subsections, middle-aged women are making 54 cents on a dollar. Women who are older have twice the chance of being in poverty. Now, will it help? We know it will help because we have 16 states where there are ERAs in which we have experience. It has helped homemakers, it's helped employed women, it's helped older women, and it even helps men. And we know there's only one problem. We have an opponent, an opposition, that lies about this amendment.
That's about as brief as we can be.
Briefly, Mrs. Schlafly, why should there not be an ERA in Iowa?
Well, our opposition to ERA is not based on a smear of our opponents, as their campaign is. Our opposition to it is based on the legal effects that we believe a state ERA will have. For example, when ERA was going through the Iowa legislature, some of the legislators tried to attach another sentence that said it will not have anything to do with abortion. They wouldn't allow that sentence in. And this clearly shows that they are and will use ERA to try to force the taxpayers of Iowa to pay for abortions. This is exactly what has happened in other states like Massachusetts and Connecticut, where through courts, through ACLU lawsuits, they got the court to order tax funding of abortions.
Mike, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, on the issue of abortions, your side makes in this argument the fact that the state's going to have to pay for abortions. What's the evidence that you use to cite that? What cases, what
Well,
states?
the principal evidence is the Doe versus Maher case in Connecticut, where the court specifically held that the state ERA required them to pay tax funds for abortions. Connecticut tried to pass a law prohibiting tax funds for abortions, and the state of Connecticut court held that unconstitutional, specifically citing the ERA.
Ms. Smeal?
Well, she's conveniently not talking about Pennsylvania or Hawaii or Massachusetts, by the way, which ruled that the Equal Rights Amendment did not apply to abortions. And she's citing a case in Connecticut, which she's citing only part of it, because Connecticut treats Medicaid funding. Now, remember, their literature is reason why we're saying the word lie, we have to. It's not saying anything against their opponents, but just saying what their statements are, is because they're half-truths, and more importantly, they distort. They say in their literature that this will pay for all abortions. What we're talking about is Medicaid funding abortions, and in this particular state of Connecticut, they said it was a right. In most other states, including Iowa, where it has been very explicit, it is a privilege. It will not cover. It is a bogus argument, and a bogus argument that covers up what their real intent is, to ban all abortions.
Okay, but here is the Connecticut case. It's this long, and it specifically says that the clause of the Constitution of the state of Connecticut, which prohibits abortion Medicaid funding, is prohibited by the state ERA. It's just as clear as it can be.
State Medicaid rules.
That's right.
But
it's the state ERA that requires tax-funded abortions.
And you're not mentioning Pennsylvania, and you're not mentioning
No, but
Massachusetts,
our
although you
argument-
did, and although you said that, you don't pull out Massachusetts because it
Massachusetts
explicitly
does
says
tax-funded abortions.
Yes, but not because of the Equal Rights Amendment, and you know that.
No.
They explicitly said it.
But
didn't.
anyway,
I interrupt?
the whole
Settle that, David.
The whole problem is it puts it up to the court to decide instead of the
Well, what's wrong with
legislature.
that?
What's wrong with that?
That's the way we
Because-
settle disputes in our society, Ms. Schlafly.
No,
We
it
go to the
isn't. A
courts.
political decision, like whether the taxpayers are going to pay for abortions, is a political issue that should be decided by your legislature, not by your unelected court.
But actually, the state legislature put this on the ballot. Remember, the state legislature of Iowa has passed it overwhelmingly twice. Both Republicans and Democrats have passed the Equal Rights Amendment.
Ms. Smeal, why didn't the proponents of this measure agree to the abortion-neutral language that she mentions? I mean, you have a process going along. People have some reservations, whether they're founded or not, that this could lead to funding of abortions. Now, you say it doesn't.
Yes.
If that's true, then why didn't you go along with their request for language that would make the amendment abortion-neutral?
Because we were very explicit on the amendment, and we wanted to cover just sex discrimination. By the way, when we did modify the amendment on the word gender, because they said, well, gender, in Vermont, they tortured us with a little ditty saying, because it said on the basis of sex you couldn't discriminate, or you must provide equality of rights. They then had a little ditty on their television ad saying, it's not the sex you are, but the sex you do. And they said, why don't you say gender? So then we put gender in the Iowa one, and they're still bringing out the same old tired arguments, because they don't want us to discuss equal rights in employment. They don't want us to discuss equal rights in education. They don't really want us to talk about the money issues because they know they would lose on them.
There isn't any legal difference between sex and gender. I don't know anybody who can tell me any legal difference. So that's the
Then
thing.
why do you make a big deal in your literature about the word gender? You do it right here. You say, see that gender? That's the
Right.
hidden word. But
It is. It is.
Why
And it's
is
not
it
on
then?
the ballot. And that's a very important point. And about
Wait,
half
you
the
just switched
ballots
what you said.
in Iowa do not contain the words that are in the language, gender equality.
But deal with the question here that she has raised, and that is the word gender.
I can tell you there's no legal difference between using
Then
the word
why
sex.
do you say that? Why do you circle the word gender and say,
Because
why
that's
didn't they
what's-
put the word sex
I
in?
didn't say that.
Oh, it says here that the words gender and equality will give the courts the power to implement, and you make
That's
a
right.
big deal out of it.
It doesn't mention
asking
sex
why
at
they-
all. It doesn't say anything about sex.
But
David,
you
and
have
I'm-
said it over and over
I
again.
want to move on to the pay equity issue. Ms. Smeal, how does this issue guarantee equal pay? I mean, we have laws on the books now that are supposed to do that. How will this, two-part question, how will this make any difference, and what will this mean to men?
I'm really glad you asked it, because number one, it gives the constitutional standard, which is the highest standard. It gives more power to the employment discrimination laws, which if we are against sex discrimination, in employment, we should give it the full force of the Constitution. It gives us a better chance in court to win. And secondly, it closes all the loopholes. And it not only strengthens the existing laws, it closes the loopholes in them. So it is much more comprehensive coverage. And how does it affect men? In employment, men should be grateful if there's more power to fight sex discrimination in wages, because if you have a cheap labor pool, eventually it pulls down all wages. If women's wages go up, it threatens men's wages less, and in fact it is better for all workers.
Iowa is one of the 50 states. It is subject to the Federal Equal Pay Act, the Civil Rights Act. They have the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to enforce the law against anybody who violates the law, and ERA does not add anything to that. It does appear that what Ms. Smeal is wanting is comparable work, which is equal results, which is tossing it into the hands of some bureaucrat and saying, we want you to pay the women the same as the men, even though they are not doing the same work. Like they want the secretary to be paid the same as the electrician or the prison guard. Now, this is a form of wage control to achieve equal results. And I don't think the voters understand that that's what they want. We believe in equal pay for equal work and equal employment.
But if that's true, why doesn't that exist, Ms. Schlafly? If that's true,
it
why
does
doesn't
exist.
Well, what's the 71 cents?
There's not only
Bureau of Labor
the
Statistics.
71 cents is an average of all women across the country. And the reason all women will never get the same pay as all men is because 25 years ago, talented, capable, educated women like myself devoted our lives to raising our children instead of to increasing our pay in the workforce. And that is the reason. And people like me, who 25 years out of the workforce are averaged into that 71 cents.
Well, first place, at all ages, and we've looked at it by gender, women make less. And not only do they make it at all ages, we've looked at it by occupation. If you compare a woman in a clerical job versus a man in a clerical job, or a woman in exactly the same job.
Let her finish.
Well, first place, we do file claims. One of the reasons you don't know how ineffective the laws are is you folks are always fighting not only the implementation of these laws, you oppose every one of those laws. Oh, you oppose them all.
That is completely
and
untrue.
you don't try to enforce them. You don't try to implement them. It is us who take the cases to law, and we know that frankly, if you're for those laws, then just give them the power of the Constitution.
Let's move on to another
They've
subject.
got the power of the federal government.
Now, I'm talking about the state constitution. Let's not mix up what we're saying.
Mrs. Schlafly, how would the ERA affect gay rights?
Well, look at the language of it. The language says you can't deny equality of rights on account of gender. Now, if a couple of men show up at the office of the city clerk and say, we want a marriage license, and she looks at him and says, you're both the same gender, I'm not giving it to you, she would have denied equality of rights. And I think you'd kind of have to be blind, deaf, and dumb not to understand the political activism of the gay rights movement. They're filing suits all the time. They were filing for same-sex marriage licenses in the District of Columbia this year. They're trying to be Boy Scout leaders. They're trying to get their rights to rent an apartment in a mom-and-pop flat. They are trying all sorts of things. And the basic argument against the ERA is that what it does is to move these decisions into the hands of the courts to decide.
Does it affect gay rights?
No, and she knows it doesn't. We have had equal rights amendments in 16 states, 12 of them almost exactly like this one in Iowa. They've been enforced. No state can she point to where it has legalized gay marriages nor promote them. What they're doing is they're taking an issue and maligning a group of people who do not need, especially at this time in the AIDS epidemic, more people bashing them. What they do need is more understanding.
Mr. Schlafly, can you cite a case in where it has affected the homosexuals in that state?
They are using, no, I cannot, because
it doesn't exist.
No, because you look at the language of it. You can cite legal authorities. I was on the platform with one of the great legal constitutional lawyers of all time, Senator Sam Ervin, when he said the only group of people the ERA will help is homosexuals. I went to law school more recently after I was 50 years old. The principal law book used in the law schools on sex discrimination say that the effect in this area is not yet clear. When is it going to be clear? After they get it on the books?
Wait a minute.
Mike?
She says the only group that's affected is homosexuals. It's been
Didn't say
enforced. Well, you said what Sam Ervin said. He's
Help.
been dead for several years. But it hasn't helped them. They've been enforced since 1971 in the state of Pennsylvania, but many other states. In no state,
there's
you can't
enormous
cite one
litigation.
case, but I can show you where it's helped homemakers, where it's helped employed women, where it's helped older women fight discrimination. And so it's a bogus
kind of
argument. In
discrimination?
20
Let's get
years,
back to
I'll
our
tell you
panel.
exactly.
Mike?
Discrimination.
Mrs. Schlafly, has your attitude on gay rights changed since your son has publicly acknowledged he's a homosexual?
No, it hasn't. Do you think that's relevant? I don't hate anybody. And what this was an attack on me, which shows the political collusion of the gay rights activists and the pro-abortionists to attack me because of my son, who lives a very private life. And the attack was launched in a homosexual paper in New York City.
But what
And you know, this is so irrelevant to what the ERA is going to do to the people of Iowa.
No, I Ms. Schlafly, the point
It's
I'm
very
getting at-
clear.
the point
I
I'm-
have
Let me
no
explain.
animus toward homosexuals.
Ms. Schlafly, let him explain why he asked the question.
The point being, I sense in what you're saying that there is some disapproval of a lot of moves that have been launched towards gay rights. What I'm wondering, and you've opposed those, what I'm wondering is, has your attitude on that changed because of a major personal occurrence in your life?
No, my attitude is completely consistent. What I oppose is giving the homosexuals the special preferential rights that they are agitating for, such as affirmative action to get themselves designated as a minority like race or sex under the civil rights law. And you know, the Democratic Party platform specifically calls for that, and the Republican platform specifically opposes it. That is the kind of special preferential rights. Likewise, the same-sex marriage licenses. Those are the things I oppose. But I think the homosexuals should have all the constitutional rights of the rest of us: free speech, free religion, due process, and all the rest.
Can I move on here?
David?
I'd like to move on to another question.
Can I say one other thing about it, though? Because she keeps saying that they're not bashing the gay people, but their ads show them in a stereotypic and negative way. And not only that, I mean, I think the public should know they do link ERA and AIDS. This is an Alton, Illinois publication. I mean, essentially, they have lied about this issue at a time, and public should know about that.
There's no lie in there.
Oh,
There's no
please.
lie
Ms.
in there.
Smeal, what about the issue she raised? Are feminists and supporters of this trying to attack her because of her son?
No, in fact, I have known about her son for years. I have not outed him, and I do think it's hypocritical for her to attack the National Organization for Women, which I was the president of, because we admit we have lesbian members as well as straight members, married members as well as single members. They won't admit who they have even in their own family. So that's the reality.
Can I move on? In the states that have the Equal Rights Amendment, the 16 states, how has it worked? What do you think it's meant in those states? You've mentioned the Connecticut and Pennsylvania cases, but how about the other states? And I want both of you. Ms. Smeal, you first. What has it meant in those states?
I'm glad you asked. We did a total review right this year because of the Iowa ERA being on the ballot of what's happened in the other states. And I can tell you exactly. It has meant more athletic opportunities for women. In several states, cases have been litigated, and the results are, and I do look at results, is that there's more interscholastic sports for women and there's more spending for them. It has meant for homemakers in divorce settlements that their non-monetary contribution, or what they do but they don't get paid for it, is valued equally. So it has raised settlements and child support. It has meant we have won employment cases where a woman was laid off discriminatorily, and this is a recession, and she could fight that. So it's in specific areas of employment and education and divorce. It has been helpful.
Mrs. Schlafly, what do you think it has meant in the states?
What it has meant, there are two states where they specifically have tax-funded abortions as a result of the ACLU lawsuit. Those are Massachusetts and Connecticut. Then we have the states that have unisex insurance. Maryland is another state with a state ERA. And just this year, they raised the life insurance rates on women, simply to comply with this unisex mandate. There are other states where the ACLU is litigating all the time. You know, they put out the literature to their lawyers saying use state ERAs to stop parental consent laws for minors having abortions. It's in their literature. We urge you to use the state ERA to do that. Now, there are not 16 states that have state ERAs. I can tell you, as an Illinois lawyer, we do not have it in Illinois. And our legislature rejected ERA every year for 10 years. What we have is the kind of language that I would recommend, which is the language of the 14th Amendment, equal protection of the laws. And we have 100 years of court decisions that show what that means. And it doesn't mean there's nutty same-sex type of gender equality that the ERA would do.
But if the 14th Amendment worked, why do so many women feel discriminated against?
Well, discriminated against?
Yeah.
Well, I believe in equal pay for equal work, but I don't believe in equal pay for unequal work or equal results.
Do you think there is sex discrimination in America today?
I think there are some people who violate the law, any law you have. But I think we have remedies in place to deal with that. And I don't think that, we have laws against murder. Murders still take place. Do you think if we passed a constitutional amendment saying you can't murder, that would solve the crime problem?
I'll leave that question, Kay.
Let's talk about November 4th. What is the aftermath? Let's say Iowa passes a state ERA. What happens then across the nation?
What happens in the nation is I think it gives encouragement, and is the only thing I think that they're saying is true, to more constitutional amendments passing, and eventually to a federal one passing. And, basically, we keep hearing, I want to go back to some things she's saying, like it will increase insurance rates. It won't increase insurance rates. And, in fact, right now, the amendment is being used in several states to fight the discrimination in insurance that it taxes really women, older women especially. Let's take auto insurance, which they keep citing. Women won't pay more in auto insurance. It will be on the basis of the miles you drive, not on your sex. And if it's on the basis of the miles you drive, women at all ages drive half as much as men.
Let's get the other side.
Yes, of course.
What's the effect in other states?
What's the effect on November 4th? What happens across the nation if the ERA passes?
Well, I suppose that since they haven't won anywhere since 1977 and they've been defeated in state after state after state, I suppose that if it's passed here, they will encourage them to go for more.
What happens if it's defeated?
If it's defeated, I don't know what they're. You have to ask them what they're going to do.
What will your group do if it's defeated?
Well, we will rejoice if it's defeated because we think it will be a great plus for women.
Oh, plus for women.
Yes.
Mrs. Schlafly, one of the things that is pretty clear about this campaign, and it has been a very hot one. Your side is running ads with very controversial images. The other side is running some ads with some controversial images. What does it say about this issue, and are the voters of this state rewarded by a campaign that's conducted like that?
Well, I would like to point out that our ads do not make any personal attack, but their ads are highly personally negative against me. And I hope the Iowa voters are turned off with that type of smear tactic. They have put out literature about me personally, which is false, ugly, and negative.
That's simply not true.
We do not do that at all. All of our literature is addressed specifically to the legal results of ERA.
It's not true what she's saying. There's no personal attack. We have 4 ads. One's a wage gap ad. Incidentally, we have no negative imagery that you're talking about.
You have an ad with a Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah, Ku Klux Klan. Isn't that
a
negative?
reality. That is
it is not a
about
reality.
discrimination.
I'm sorry,
what
Ms.
we're
Mead.
saying is in the past, people have fought discrimination. And we're saying that they have fought it on the basis of race, and they have fought the correction of discrimination.
What
on the
evidence
basis
do
of
you
sex
have
and
that
race.
anybody involved in the anti-ERA movement in this state is affiliated with the Klan?
We didn't say they're affiliated with the
Well,
Klan.
it's
What
called
we're
guilt by
saying is that
association.
the
What evidence do you have, Mrs. Schlafly, what evidence do you have that Mrs. Smeal and the people who share her views are affiliated with witchcraft or child killing?
I didn't say that.
Do you believe
Robertson
that's true?
I didn't say it.
You
Do you believe it's
disassociate
true?
yourself with it.
I only defend what I write. And I think I
He
present the
retracted that,
legal
didn't he?
arguments.
Didn't
I
Pat
think that's
Robertson
irrelevant.
retract that statement?
No, he didn't. What he said
Yes, he
is-
did.
I thought he went on
retracted it
NBC on national
he-
television
he
and said
did.
it was a mistake, and he didn't mean to say
He
that.
did, but he's
He's
not on the
using it.
ballot. He is not on the
He's the
ballot.
fundraiser.
What he says is basically irrelevant. And again, we need to address what the ERA is going to do. And what it is a blank check to the Iowa courts to make all these decisions, like tax funding, like gay rights, like insurance rates, all the rest.
One issue that has come up in this campaign is the question of veterans' preference. Ms. Smeal, will passage of the ERA affect veterans at all?
No, in fact, it's even been litigated. It doesn't. Incidentally, they don't say veterans' preference. Again, our opponents have deceived people. They say veterans' benefits will be taken down. And in fact, they won't. In no state have they been. And if they had, you would have heard about it. I mean, one of our troubles is they make an assertion, and it's hard to show that a negative doesn't exist. But it doesn't exist in any state.
Well, let me point out that what we did was to quote the testimony of the president of the League of Women Voters, Dorothy Ridings, who testified that ERA would wipe out veterans' preference. Yes, she did testify. Now, it's a matter of opinion. We can't prove it one way or the other. It hasn't. But we can. They would try their cases, and they have indeed.
Veterans' preference is not benefits.
Why are you using it in advertising?
Because they'll litigate. Don't you know ERA is open season for the lawyers to go to court? And the ACLU is revving up its lawyers, and the NOW is revving up its lawyers, and they want to decide these cases.
We have a minute left. Who has a final question?
Well, I want to make sure that veterans' preference is different than veterans' benefits. A lot of veterans probably watching this program wondering what's going to happen. Now, veterans' benefits, that's a federal matter, isn't it?
And benefits are like awards for you've been wounded money things. Preference is a hiring thing, and it's a total different thing. And their literature talks about benefits. In no case has that been even litigated, and it isn't even challenged. And this is one testimony. Fact of the matter, veterans' preference was even litigated, and it was lost. It does not apply.
But they keep trying. They keep trying.
Don't keep trying.
They
that
keep trying.
Reality.
And the state where they litigated it was in the state before the passage of the state ERA.
Is it healthy to have a campaign that's dominated by the churches as this one is? Mrs. Schlafly?
Churches?
Yes.
Well, I think everybody's got a right to have an opinion about the issues, and even if you go to church, I think you have a right to.
But the problem is that they're trying to tear down separation of church and state. The major opponent is the Christian Coalition, tied to the religious right, in which even the campaign manager is tied to. Pat Robertson has been working with them since 1985. They're trying to legislate one way, which is a very narrow way, is to secretly take over politics here in Ireland.
Look, we're not trying to legislate anything. We're just asking people to vote no on Amendment 1. They are the ones who are trying to change the Constitution.
No, what your secret agenda is to take politics over so that you will eliminate the separation of church and state. You will have tax-funded religion and religious schools.
My agenda is that I have to close the program, and it's right here.
Right.
Thank you very much, both of you, for showing us what a real spirited discussion is. Thank you for being here. Well, this edition of Iowa Press completes our pre-election coverage, and when you join us next time, we'll begin our analysis of how you decided the issues. The chairman of Iowa's two major political parties will be joining us, Richard Schwarm of the Iowa Republican Party and John Rourke of the Democrats. We'll be here next Sunday at noon and at 7 Sunday night here on Iowa Public Television. And before we leave you, also a program reminder to pass along. Tomorrow, the senatorial campaign closes with a debate between incumbent Charles Grassley and challenger Jean Lloyd Jones. That debate is sponsored by the Des Moines Chamber of Commerce, and it can be seen live here on Iowa Public Television. Live coverage beginning at 12:30 noon from the Hotel Savory in downtown Des Moines. And then we'll have a taped replay of that debate at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. And then at 10:30 tomorrow night, Iowa Public Television will present the alternative candidates in that 92 senatorial campaign. We hope that you'll be able to join us for one final look at the candidates seeking to represent Iowa in the U.S. Senate. And that's it for this edition of Iowa Press. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you next Sunday. Until then, I'm Dean Ford.
Major funding for Iowa Press has been provided by Friends of Iowa Public Television, with additional funding provided by the Daily Tribune of Ames, owned by Iowans who love Iowa and believe in a free press and in Iowa's community newspapers.